the cloud.
Right.
I'm gonna share my screen.
So I saw Stephen and Avery join. So hey guys.
Hi everybody. Okay, good seeing you, several of you again. Let's see. So you should be able to see right now the thumbnails of all these drop-in sessions that we've had, at least the ones that I've been responsible for. The topic today is going to be buttons we think you should know about. It turns out there are hundreds and hundreds of buttons and choices and drop-downs in Flow, and some of them, well, they're all important on some level, but some of them are important so frequently that I figured I'd do a first of a session here to kind of introduce the top 10. And my suspicion is that this will be an ongoing event, and maybe we'll add to these lists of buttons as time goes on. Okay, please feel free to
create the breakout room, just FYI, and Bill, continue to take it away, and I'll be back soon.
Okay, great. And please feel free to interrupt as I'm going through here if you have any questions. Okay, so this is the topic, some buttons you should know about. Okay, so here what I've got is I've got my normal swarm here of life expectancy data. You've seen this before. You've seen this chart before also, which is the life expectancy across about 50 countries for 160 years, 8,000 data points, just expressed as dots in a 2D scatter plot here. Nothing fancy yet. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is, okay, so what I've done here, let's say I've spent some significant time getting everything perfect in this in this scatter plot for a presentation I'm going to do. And a couple of the things that I really wanted to do for my mock presentation here is I wanted to make sure that this life expectancy chart is expressed starting at 0 and going up to 100 years. Let's say for some reason that was really important to me. And there are many charts that you're working on where you're going to want to do something similar. Maybe it actually shouldn't be too important for this particular chart, but there'll be other charts where getting these axes is exactly right is a very important thing to do. Okay, so now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to edit and re-upload my data. Let's say I had occasion to modify the data and I want to update it here. So I'm going to choose a file here. Oops. Oh my gosh, let's see. There we go. Okay. Let me navigate to my directory where I've got this data here. Okay, and my data set is country, world, population. Oh, let me see, what is my data set here? Hang on one second. Sorry about this. This is it's my life expectancy data, and I have this rather than in our library, which is where we usually get this data. I saved a copy of this on my hard drive here for this example here. So my data set is global life expectancy _01. Okay, so what I'm going to do now here is I'm going to upload this. Okay, just like I normally would do to refresh. Okay, and now, okay, look what's happened here. I went through all this trouble. I had all my axes labeled, and now what I'm having here is I'm seeing that my range here for my vertical axis is going from like 8 years up to 80 years or 83 years. Okay, this is after I've done all this work to get it in the way I wanted it. Okay, so that is not a good thing, but luckily there is a way to make sure that this does not ever happen again. Okay, this is very easy to overlook, and this is why I'm pointing it out, is my #1 recommendation for a button you should know very, very well. Okay, the button appears here in this edit upload dialog. And there's a button up here that says update domains on re-upload. And this says, if this button is checked, what Flow is going to do when you upload your data set, it's going to reset the ranges for your axes. And maybe there are a few other things too, but that's the primary artifact when this button is checked. And this is a very good button to have checked initially when you're just getting a feel for your data and maybe you're going through some initial revisions and the like. It's nice to have Flow automatically compute what the ranges of the height and depth and height, depth, and width axes are. But once you're in a state where you've got your flow pretty well developed and now you're just fine-tuning the data, maybe there are modifications that have come in and you just need to tweak the data a bit. If you uncheck this button, then what's going to happen is when you upload your data, the height, width, and depth axis ranges are not going to be reset. So all this configuration work that you've done to get your presentation perfect, some of that's not going to be overwritten if you uncheck this button. So unchecking update domains on re-upload, really important button to know about. And I've tried to train myself to periodically uncheck this once I get my data in a decent shape. And once I've gone through the process of setting what I want, exactly what I want my axis ranges to be. Okay. So any questions on that? So if I had that unchecked when I did this upload here, just get rid of this here. When I did this upload on this step back here, I would have maintained my 0 to 100-year range rather than having it modified due to the content of what's in the data. Okay, that's probably going to take more time on that particular subject than any of the others. But any questions? Okay, and on step 4 of this presentation, this flow will be available, or this presentation will be available for you to watch. I put some additional explanation here as to exactly what I just said. Okay, next button to be aware of. Okay, so Flow has a lot of very complex internal settings. And as you're reconfiguring your flow, all these settings are being reconfigured on the fly. And there's a lot of complexity going on underneath the covers. Every once in a while, what you'll find is you may get yourself in a position where you've done so much reconfiguration here that Flow is just having a difficult time catching up on re-rendering everything that you've set. So if you ever find yourself where Flow is just not quite displaying something the way you think it should, here is the process. Go over here to this hamburger icon. Used to be 3 dots, by the way. Just in the last few days, we've replaced that with kind of this hamburger icon. Save, just make sure everything is saved. So click Save, and then come out to your browser button, or out to your browser, and hit the refresh button. It's in slightly different places on different browsers. I always use Chrome, and it's this kind of refresh icon here. So if everything is not completely rendering, save, and then click the refresh browser page button. So some of you are probably already familiar with this, but this is commonly enough needed. It's just a good thing to know about. And by default now, whenever I get myself in a position where things just don't quite look right for whatever reason, I will do that. I'll go through that process, and almost all the time, that's what resolves it. So think of this as getting a fresh sheet of paper. You put all these doodles on your sheet of paper, and now you just want to refresh that whole thing. That is what this is doing here. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. So that's a button that's actually in your browser, not in Flow. Okay, next thing I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the face camera button for text, images, and maps. So if I take a look at a text object, let's say on this screen here, this face camera button is checked. I think it's checked by default. And the moral of what I'm saying here is that sometimes you want it checked and sometimes you don't want it checked. Like most of the time, you'll want this to be checked. But let's say I was doing something here where I'm trying to figure out the best position in relation to a swarm for this text object, let's say. So I'm going to rotate my camera position here. And what's happening here is I find that this text object is placed near the origin, and it's I mean, it's not responding very much when I rotate my camera because it's in such a position that it's not supposed to be modified. But for some things that I may want to do, it might just be handy for me to have that face camera unchecked. So I'm going to uncheck that button right now. Okay, actually, it's put it a little slant because my camera position's changed. But now you'll see when I rotate my swarm here, this is probably a little jumpy on Zoom, but you'll see that this text object now, it's much easier for me to tell where it is. Okay, I can tell it's right in the middle of the swarm here because when I rotate my camera position, it's just, as long as the text is not facing the camera at all the time, I can see where it is. Okay, so face camera buttons are available on every text object, every image, every map, I believe. So it's a very commonly used button. I think it's usually checked by default, and usually you want it to be checked. But there are occasions where you want to uncheck your face camera button, especially when you're doing layout work on a swarm. Any questions on that? Okay. Okay, next. Another thing is, if you have, for whatever reason, if you've put your camera in an unusual position where it's not looking straight on to the data or your objects, you'll find that in the case of, let's say this text here, this text that I've got on here, sometimes moving these text objects around with these grab handles, they may do some unusual things, especially when your camera's at a slant. So down at the bottom of, and using these handles just might not give you the kind of response that you're looking for. So down at the bottom of the definition of every object within Flow, I'm going to look at this particular text object here. We've got ways of positioning the object on the screen in the scene. We've got ways of rotating the object and scaling it. So, positioning it allows you to move it from left to right, up and down, and the like. So some of you are probably familiar with this. Now here I'm moving this from left to right, but since due to my camera position, it's not really going left to right on my screen here because of my weird camera position. But my rotation here, maybe sometimes if I use my rotation settings here, maybe I'll get a better response with what I want to do with this particular object. So these items here at the bottom of the definition of every object, these are great friends for you in doing layout, especially fine-tuning layout of objects. So if you're having trouble repositioning things using these arrows, get familiar with the positioning the positioning controls, the rotation controls, and the scaling controls. Okay. Scaling allows you to reduce the relative size of an object. Like here, I'll take it from 1 to 0.5, let's say. I'm just going to halve the size of that object. So now you can see it's diminished in size by a factor of 2 here. So anyway, these items, these controls in the bottom of the definition of every text object are important items for you to know about.
Hey, Bill, I have a quick question. For the position and the rotation and the scale, there's a refresh icon next. Is that like a reset it to the origin or something?
Oh, this here, right here?
Actually, each of one of them has one, like position, rotation, and scale. They each on the very
Oh, I
right.
see. Oh, the refresh. Oh, actually, you know what? I don't use that very often. Let's see what happens when I press it here. Okay, yeah, okay. It resets it back to the origin, 000.
Okay,
Probably going to do that for each of these objects here. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
thanks.
By the way, this is not included in this particular session, but I'll just mention it. If you go over to your settings, there is a setting that has to do with whether or not you want Flow to be auto-saving your flow or not as you make changes. Usually I have that set off, and always in my training sessions, I always have it, turned off, because as I'm doing these kinds of manipulations with my training materials, I don't want Flow to be saving those changes and just kind of modifying what I expect to see in my training materials. So this is an individual choice. You can either have Flow autosave approximately every 30 or 45 seconds for you, or if you have this checked, or if you uncheck it, then you've got complete control of when you save. So I'll just mention that. To me, that's a fairly important button because I do so much training, but that's a personal choice of yours as to how you want to have that set. Okay, so step number 7, I think we're done on that. Okay, step number 8, highlight enabled. Okay, highlight enabled, this is a swarm attribute. And within a swarm, it's an interactions attribute. Okay, so yeah, so there's a button here called highlight enabled. And what highlight enabled does is it sets up your swarm so that when you click on a button, things that are related or things that are described here to be highlighted will be highlighted. Okay, so now here is something you might not have ever had occasion to see before, and maybe it's going to be a little surprising. So what happens when I click this button, this dot here? Okay, this is my random swarm. Okay, what I've told and what's happened here, all these buttons have lit up. And that's because I've got highlight enabled. I'm keying on the year. So whatever the year is of this particular dot, 1883 in this case, all the other 1883 occurrences in my data set are going to be highlighted. Okay. Now I've done this on a random swarm, kind of an odd thing to do, but the point here is that no matter what your format of your swarm is, if you've got highlighting on, you can achieve certain types of highlighting. So in here, the highlight, I've got the color is going to be white when it's highlighted. I've changed my dot size. So now the dot size, instead of being 0.01, it's now 0.02. So there are a few settings you can do here, and this is toggleable. You can toggle it on and off your highlight enabled. Okay, so that's a handy item to know about, you know, you'll have occasion where it's useful to use it, usually in scatter plots, but it can even also be used in a random swarm like this.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
Question on that. Could that work in a map too? And could you highlight more than one category in a single swarm?
Yeah, you can highlight more than one category. Let me see. Let me go back to this step here where I've got my highlight. Highlight enabled here. Okay. I noticed here, you know what? It's not rendering here. Okay, so what is that step I told you about before? I said go out and save, and then refresh your browser button. Let's put this to a test use right now because it's not rendering the way I expected here. It's not highlighting for me. Let me just refresh this. Just going to take a second here. And let me come back to this step number 7 and see if it's highlighting now that I've refreshed. And then I'm going to show you how you can do multiple. Okay. Okay, this is not that large a flow. Surprised this is not reloading here. Okay, I'm going to exit here. We had a major release last night and something is not quite right here. Okay. You know what? Let me stop sharing here. And I'm going to, okay, it finally reloaded there. Not sure what was going on there. Okay, let me start sharing again here in my Zoom window. It's possible my Zoom video might have been interfering with the responsiveness there. I'm not sure. Okay, now I'm going to click this again. Let's see. Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, so if you want to highlight multiple items, what you do here is you do a shift and then click. Now you see when I did that, I mean, this is crazy in this random swarm here, but when I shift clicked it and then clicked another button, it added to the number of buttons that were highlighted. So if I do that again and again, you know, I can do that as many times as I want. So that's how you can shift. Say if you've got a regular scatter plot and you've got life expectancy, let's say for Russia and France and the UK, and you want to compare 2 of them against each other, you just click any button in the Russia curve, shift, click any button in the UK curve, and you have 2 buttons. You have 2 of those curves highlighted. Okay. Did that answer your question? Okay. Okay, and then, yeah, I think Stephen, you're on mute there a second ago.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was going to say I probably need to just get in and poke around on myself. I'm thinking of like a map being able to highlight different populations. Like if there were some sort of key and you wanted to call out, like, you know, click on people who were born in a certain country and now living in the U.S. Like you click like that country, and then you would see in the U.S. where they're living.
Oh yeah, yeah. The same would apply to swarms of a dots that belong to a swarm on a map, as well as what I've showed you here.
But we could do that all in the same swarm, have different things highlighted.
Well, let's see. No, right now for a given swarm, we only have the capability for having one definition for highlighting. So it's not like it's totally flexible in that regard.
Okay.
But you can probably craft your CSV data so the data is set in a way where you've got some parameters that you'll be able to show multiple types of things just by defining this to be one particular parameter. I'd have to take a look at your data set and see exactly what it is you want to do to really give you a definitive answer on that. But it's got some flexibility, but being able to highlight being able to specify multiple highlighting interactions we don't support that yet.
Okay, thank you.
Like many things that will come in the future, but it's not here today. Okay, so that's highlight enabled. Okay. Okay, here's an interesting one. Actually, I did not know about this one until fairly recently. I happened to be working on a flow for one of our big customers, the UN, and we've gone through and we developed a flow. It looks great on 2D or 3D, simulated 3D on 2D screens. But what was really important to them for this particular flow is that it performed well on phones. So, what I did is had my first occasion to use this particular functionality I'm going to show you here. So I'm going to go into the Create Story module. Okay. And someday we'll have one of these presentations. This just has to do with Create Story. Okay. And what this is going to do, this is a module where you can kind of make some ad hoc modifications if you're a presenter in the flow. But among other things, it's got this neat button down here, mobile camera position. I'm going to click this. And now what I can see is I can step through my whole flow here, and I can see how it's going to look on a camera form factor. So let me step through it here real quick. So the first step looks fine. Second step, maybe a little small, looks okay. Third step, okay. Fourth step, I got problems here. The way I laid out this flow, it's kind of wide horizontally. So when I'm going to view this on the phone, this is going to be a little compromised. Okay, so I make a note of that. Maybe I want to change that in my flow here. Okay. The next step seems to be perfect. Okay, this one here. Well, here I've got my text. I've got this a little bit on the too wide side. So anyway, this button here can be used for very easily showing you what your flow is going to look like if it's going to be displayed in a phone form factor. So really useful if you're going to be making an AR video, and if you're going to, or if you're going to have widespread use of this flow on a phone. This is a really nice and easy to access capability for seeing how things are going to look on your phone. And what you can also do, you can even also set your camera position preview for your phone in this step. So this will be a whole topic unto itself at some future training, but just wanted to point out this button to you right now. It's in the Story Creator, and it's the mobile camera position button. I'm going to come back into my visualized data. I'm going to leave the Story Creator and come back here. Okay. Okay, we've already seen highlight enabled. Okay, and create story. Check what your flow will look like on a phone. Okay. Next thing, advanced mode. Okay, over here, there is a setting where you can ask to be put into the advanced UI rather than the non-advanced UI, I guess. Okay, maybe a simpler UI. My best practice advice to you guys is always check the advanced UI button because, well, as an example here, you'll notice in my data objects timeline here, I can see swarms, maps, images, and text. But that's great for a beginner, let's say. But let's say if I wanted to do some actions and buttons. If I click this advanced UI here, I'm going to see some additional things here. I'm going to see models, buttons, groups, lines, images. So, in my opinion, there's almost no downside to having this advanced UI button click. Always be in the advanced mode. Now, our engineers, just within the last week or so, have changed this a little bit. So what we found is once a user decides he wants to be in advanced mode for a particular flow, he's basically, history seems to suggest he wants to be in advanced mode for every flow he creates from that point onward. So what we have got, this is brand new in the software, is once you go into advanced mode, that will stick with you on your user record. And from that point on, every time you create a flow, the advanced mode is going to be enabled by default. Okay. So, the best practice is always go into advanced mode. There's very, very little downside. Actually, I don't know of any downside. The upside is you'll be able to see some things that, for whatever reason, appear in the advanced mode where they're not appearing in the simple mode. And you can toggle this back and forth. If I want to get back to the simple UI, I just click it. So that's the advanced mode button. It's under settings. And it's an important item, especially for advanced users. Okay. Filters, hide filtered categories. Okay. So this is in the filters area, which is a swarm area. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I've got my swarm attribute checked here. And I'm going down to my filters here. And there's this check button here, hide filtered categories. Now, what I've got here for my life expectancy data set is I've got information that has to do with different continents. I'm gonna forward to my next button here, or my next step, I'm sorry. Okay, and here what I've got is I've got a filter in here that basically says, show me the records, but only when the continent contains Africa or Asia. So what I've got here is I've got a nice 3D data set. In my depth axis, I've got Asia and Africa here, and I've got all the various countries for those continents here. Now, if I did not have this button checked, what I would have is I'd have a bunch of extra space in here for the Americas, Oceania, and Europe. They'd be excluded by the filter. So if actually this is not quite working right as of just this morning, actually, I think it has to do with our new release. Right now, when this hide filtered categories is off, actually none of the data is showing up. But if this were working, and we'll probably get that working again a little bit later today, what would happen is only the Asia curve would show up and the Africa curve would show up, and the Americas, Oceania, and Europe, these items would still be displayed on my depth axis, but there'd be no data in there. So usually that would be something you would not want to have happen. Maybe there's some use cases where you might want to show that, hey, in this filtering, I'm omitting Americas, Oceania, and Europe, and that's important to your presentation. So you might want to have that blank space in there. But the vast majority of the time, you'll want to have that set on. You'll want to have this turned on so that you're only displaying along this axis the items that are qualified via your filter. So that's in the filter section, and it's called hide filtered categories. By default, it's on. I think a while ago, by default, it was not turned on, so you get these kind of blank spots in your displays. Okay. And that is the final button that I wanted to talk about today. I mean, as I said before, there are hundreds of buttons here, and I mean this session kind of begs for some follow-on sessions that just go into other drop downs and buttons. So at this point, let me at this point, Michael and I, we just open this up for questions, either having to do with this particular topic or any other topic that you have in mind for Flow. Any questions, anybody? Okay. Let's see. I guess Michael has not yet returned. I don't know if anyone joined him over in that breakout room. Let me just send him a quick message indicating that we are ready to continue here. So I'm just going to go into my version of Slack here. Just going to send him a message. I'll be right back with you. Okay, so I just sent a quick message saying, hey, we're done with the training here, so he'll return. Let's see. Other things while we're waiting for Michael to come back. For those of you, let's see, Hao has been here before. Paolo's been here before. I'm not sure if the others of you have been here before, but an important part of Flow, I'll just mention it here, is this data objects, what we call the data objects timeline. And the way you navigate through a flow and you author a flow or modify a flow is you click on a particular data object. Here I'm clicking on the definition of swarm number 1 on step number 2. So it's this two-dimensional matrix. You got the data object and you got the step in the swarm. So swarm 1 on step 2, I click here. The definition of swarm 1 on step 2 shows up over in the right-hand pane. So the muscle memory we want you all to develop is get very used to clicking on an object here down in the data objects timeline. Here I'm clicking on image number 1 on step number 4. This is how image number 1 on step number 4 is configured. Okay. So this is the data objects timeline, and it's fundamental to how we work with flow and how we navigate through and how we compose flows. So all the featured flows that you'll find on our homepage or the a.flow.gl homepage, all those flows are composed using the same flow editor. Let me go into the chat window here and see if there are any questions here. Okay, so Stephen said he has nightmares for the life expectancy data at this point. Yeah, well, they certainly are going up. Actually, this is an interesting chart, even displaying this chart in 2D. If you look at life expectancy over the course of the last 160 years, the yellow dots are Europe. So what this chart shows that actually for several decades, life expectancy was ascending at a kind of rapid rate in Europe, and it was lagging in much of the rest of the world. And then in like 1930 or so, the rest of the world started getting access to the same kind of medical advances that were enjoyed in Europe at that, for a few decades, actually, and the rest of the world started catching up quite rapidly. So even a 2D scatter plot like this, which we often do just to throw data onto a chart to see what it basically looks like, even a 2D scatter plot like this can show very interesting data very, very quickly. Here's what happened in World War II. These are early 1940s. Notice a lot of yellow dots. These are European countries, took big life expectancy hits. This is the Spanish flu pandemic, 1918. And let's see, normally I think the way you've seen this in the past, I've made this into a 3D scatter plot. The way I do that is I just add a depth axis here and I put country on here. And now I've got this 3D scatter plot with all 60 countries with each individual curves expressed in 3D rather than just a 2D representation. Okay, so I'm just filling some time here, waiting for Michael to come back. Maybe, I'm not sure if he's going to be returning or not. Let me give you guys one final opportunity to ask any kind of question, and then what we'll do is we'll call this a wrap on this particular session. Any questions, anybody? Okay. Hey, well, thanks everybody. Thanks for attending. We'll have another session on a different topic. I think tomorrow afternoon around 5:30 Pacific. So it's kind of into evening hours for a lot of people. And I think the topic tomorrow is hierarchical data representations. Michael will teach that topic. Should be an interesting topic. As time goes on, a lot of the data sets that we're seeing have a hierarchical aspect to them. And so what we'll be going through is some description on that. Okay, this recording will be published on our website, and it'll probably be available tomorrow or sometime. Thanks a lot for attending, everybody. Enjoyed seeing you this morning. My time, Pacific time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bill. Bye.
Okay, you're very welcome. Bye-bye.